Origin Just Home reaction. This is how Russia produces 3 million artillery rounds per year. Watch out, task and purpose. Yeah, this is insane number. I don't know if it was this channel or what. I'm pretty sure it was this channel where I learned this fact. Uh, Obviously, that's an insane number. Also getting help by North Korea as well, I guess, for artillery front. US is like trying to like increase their number. There's a bill that's about to pass or something. I don't know, something like that. I don't know if it's about to pass or not because support to Ukraine has become a like an issue there. I'm guessing. Like both sides are like struggling. Should we help? Should we not help? Type. I don't know where that's going. So yeah, but yeah, this 3 million is like a really large number that nobody else has this kind of number. They're producing 3 million per year. It's like a big number. I don't know what US number was, but it was much lower. I don't know. This is gonna be interesting. Let's watch it. Remember, reflect my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so you know that way I know which type of videos to react to more. I like military style videos or geopolitics in general. I don't know what like means, but yeah, that's what's happening around the world. So it's like really interesting to see videos like this. So yeah, if you really like reactions like this, definitely comment, like, whatever. So this video can get algorithm can be helped, something like that. I don't know how YouTube algorithm works because it's constantly changing. But yeah, let's watch it.
Welcome back to Task and Purpose, Spare Parts Army. According to a NATO intelligence estimate, Russia is currently producing 250,000 artillery shells per month. That's roughly 3 million a year. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies are able to produce about 1.2 million shells. The reason this disparity is so important is because it's estimated that as much as 80% of all casualties on both sides are from artillery. Today, I want to know the main reasons as to why Russia was able to ramp up artillery production so quickly. Did they never downsize after the Cold War? I think there are three main factors, including tactical needs from past wars, sourcing cotton from around the world, and state-directed work measures that we'll explore in this video. Remember, tonight is your last chance to win these Generation 3 NVG-50 dual one-tube night vision goggles by Tribe Optics, all made possible by our partner, veteran-owned small business, GetInHerToWin.com.
I think artillery is one thing people really need to understand what it means. It just means long-range guns nowadays because it's like really accurate, right? Compared to very old guns, very old artilleries, right? That's what artillery is, right? There are howitzer and artillery is like, I'm pretty sure it's like much longer range. It is my basic knowledge, but that's what it means. So it's not surprising that 80% of damage comes or losses comes from artillery because it's literally long-range guns, right? A long range, like if you're not using missiles, you're using artilleries, I guess. So yeah. Yeah, well, go to original video page link and from there support this channel or go to this link.
And best of luck, Spare Parts Army. During a recent campaign event named Everything for Victory, Putin said, quote, "Success is achieved by the side that can react quickly. The side that does it quicker wins the battle." It took place in the military-industrial city of Tula, arguably the center of Russian arms manufacturing, with more than 10 companies producing weapons non-stop. This includes MPO Splav, the only manufacturer of multiple rocket launcher systems in Russia. Tula is the perfect example of how at the heart of Russia's military production capability are its state-owned manufacturing facilities. These facilities are strategically dispersed across the country, and most of them were inherited relics from the Soviet Union. Today, they account for 70% of all of Russia's arms production. The truth is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia never stopped being a country centered around its defense industry. We can actually trace Russia's recent artillery production incentives back to the First Chechen War of 1994. Its tactical requirements greatly influenced how the country invested in artillery, because estimates place Russian forces firing 30,000 artillery shells per day at one point during the height of the Battle of Grozny in 1994. To put that into perspective, during Operation Desert Storm in 1991, both the US Army and Marines combined fired a total of just over 60,000 artillery shells. So Russia's firing 30,000 per day, and during all of Desert Storm, only 60,000 were fired. The State Defense Order, which saw an increase from 62 billion rubles in 2002 to 302 billion rubles in 2007, making a considerable rise.
That's the thing, right? In Europe or around Russia, right? There is a specific way a battle is fought, right? That Russia knows of. That others are not really, doesn't really know much about it, right? Ukraine, Russia, both countries know how to fight, but outside countries like US or something, their mentality is different, right? Like Desert Storm is like total of 60,000 because it was fought in like different places like Middle East and things like that, right? Other wars are happening somewhere else. So when it comes to like countries around Russia, right, in that part of Europe, it's very specific way of it's fought for years, and that's how they're fighting now. So for US and other countries to like help Ukraine or anything like that, they have to like really understand the element and try to keep up. But it's still going to be hard because Russia has like, I don't know, home base advantage or some shit.
In domestic military procurement. This kept Russia's artillery production alive, and in 1999, when the Second Chechen War finally kicked off, it only increased. The nature of the Chechen War meant Russia relied heavily on artillery strikes and production. Or take the example of one of the fiercest battles of the US military has fought during the same time period, which is Iraq in Fallujah in 2004. During that battle, the US military expended a total of 5,685 155mm artillery shells in support of the ground maneuver. Here's an even better way of understanding why the US military doesn't maybe have the same incentive to invest in artillery production. During the entire initial invasion of Iraq, the whole US military fired 34,000 artillery rounds. That's it, according to documents obtained by Luke O'Brien for the Marine Corps Times. On the other hand, the US Air Force dropped millions of pounds of ordnance. And this is where we see the difference in strategy between the US and Russia. The West has leaned heavily on air power, where Russia has leaned more heavily on ground artillery. So after the Chechen War, the Russian defense industry has been focused on artillery production in ways that some Western countries were not. A lot of defense investments was going towards precision GPS-guided artillery shells in the West. The defense spending plan for Russia between 2010 and 2013 aimed for a total of 19 trillion rubles, roughly $600 billion, over the next decade to modernize their forces. Regardless of how much of that was lost to corruption or not, that's still a major increase over 14 years. In 2024, Russian officials' defense budget went up by 68%, which means that Russia's total defense spending is about 7.5% of its GDP. They are focused on war, and it's a 24/7 national effort. Russian artillery factories are operating around the clock, with employees working on mandatory rotating 12-hour shifts with double overtime. Many factories are working triple shifts. Furthermore, the Russian government has also established a 6-day work week and is calling for volunteers among civilians to help optimize production processes and meet the demands. According to a report by the Russian Ministry of Defense about the 2023 industrial growth since February 2022, the production of artillery ammunition has increased by...
Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you have absolute power, you can do a lot of things in your country. Not really force, but I don't know, like implied forced. I don't know how to say it. Basically something like that. Like, you have to, it's for your country. You have to work 6 days for this many hours. We also need volunteers to make shit. Yeah, you can literally put your military gear into like, really double or triple, right? In a way, making shit much faster, making artilleries much faster. You can just put the workforce at a whole another level. You can do that. But in democratic countries, obviously, you need to pass a lot of things. There's going to be like protests. We are not doing this. It's like struggle. Well, someone who has absolute power can just like, okay, we are doing this state of emergency or whatever.
17.5 times over. Again, whether that's truly the case or not, what we do know that is accurate is that over the past 2 years, the workforce in Russia in the defense sector has expanded significantly, with approximately 3.5 million Russians now employed in the industry. This is 1 to 1.5 million more people than before the conflict began. And just last month, Putin announced the creation of more than 500,000 new jobs in the military-industrial complex, machinists and welders employed in Russian factories that produce war equipment are currently earning higher salaries than most white-collar managers and lawyers. Now it starts to become easier to see how 3 million artillery shells per year is possible when you dedicate all your resources and incentives devoted to war. A lot is possible. Another factor aiding Russia, specifically in artillery production, is where they're sourcing gunpowder from, which has been in shortage for many countries. Artillery is made out of a few separate gun components, and gunpowder is one of the hardest to source. Cotton pulp and nitrocellulose are key to artillery manufacturing. Russia gets some of their cotton from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, who are technically neutral in the war. From an article by Anton Shevitz at Pravda.com, according to the United Nations Comtrade database, in 2021, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan shipped $4 million worth of cotton pulp to Russia. In 2022, the first year of the war, this figure increased by 150% to $10 million. The way they've gotten around the sanctions in Russia is by saying it's also a component of civilian products like varnishes and paints, not just artillery production. According to Anton Shevitz, the main recipient.
Sanctions of what? The countries that are like bordering Russia, Kazakhstan, they're not going to anger Russia, right? I don't know how their economical element is going with Kazakhstan and things, right? Especially now when Ukraine is under attack and them being former Soviet country. This wouldn't be the time to anger Russia, right? I'm pretty sure. So like everything's going to be formalities, right? Like okay, Russia wants this, they're going to give it to them. I'm pretty sure. Cotton is needed to make artillery. Like that's just insane.
Recipients of this cotton is Russia's Kazan powder plant, which produces 70% of the total Russian volume of gunpowder and shells. Meanwhile, Europe is having trouble securing gunpowder sources. The Moscow Times wrote that Turkish companies have also contributed about half of Russia's nitrocellulose imports at about 1,800 metric tons in 2023. And after that, Chinese companies account for 1/3 of the supplies. The same Chinese companies.
That's the thing, man. When Russia has China, China alone is like a powerhouse that people don't realize. Like it's saying, a lot of rare earth elements are not really rare because they're in China. That's the saying, right? People have been saying that for a long time. I think that's kind of true. China has a lot of rare earth elements that they can just use. So their monopoly is there. Russia has China to back them up, right? And also some of the countries that have like this a lot of elements that they need to make war, like Kazakhstan, Turkey, and places like that, right? Which they can just acquire. Well, Europe is gonna struggle with this, right? So on hindsight, when all this dust settles, people will see this like, what the fuck? We should have seen that coming. We should have mitigated this instance here and then. And in hindsight, people will see that. But before war started, nobody was thinking this, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of defense organizations around the world, from Europe, US, was not probably thinking this. But now the war started, and they're realizing, wow, what the fuck? Russia can just acquire these elements, and we can't even find it.
That are now denying that they can send those cotton supplies to Europe. Even if the President of the United States were to invoke the Defense Production Act, which grants the president authority to order companies to expedite the production of equipment to support national defense, it would still be tough for a democracy to dedicate so much of their resources in one area at the cost of others. Russia and other authoritarian countries can have an advantage when it comes to defense production in that one area. In the West, the gears sometimes move more slowly because things have to be done by committee. We have to argue amongst ourselves for a bit over whether or not we want to pass legislation to approve tax breaks to incentivize artillery production. I think democracy can be one of our greatest strengths, and sometimes also has a weakness that our adversaries attempt to exploit. These are the levers that Russia is.
It's only weakness if you don't have power to it's like a chess piece in a way. It's like cliche, but yeah, when you see global politics, you need to know where pieces are moving, right? If this does happen, worst case scenario, what are going to be the instances? How much gunpowder which country has? How much resources what country has? If you have to support a country. So in the end, it's like, like projection of things. I'm pretty sure there are people in the US probably see this coming. If worst to worst happens, which it did happen, Russia's going to acquire things from here. We're going to have issues. I'm pretty sure there are people in the background, right, who trying to think this. So it's a weakness in a way, sure. But, there is a reason why road limit is 40 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour. Not because most people can't drive at 100 miles per hour. 90% will be fine, but then last 10% is why we have to adhere to 40, 50 miles per hour limit. That's the way, right? And that is the best way to do things.
Is able to pull faster at the time being. Another reason Russia is able to produce so many more rounds per year actually came as kind of a shock to me. It has to do with the fact that they have very different acceptable tolerances, but more importantly, very different laws and regulations compared to the West. When I was reading about how France is trying to double their production in artillery, I came across a really interesting aspect that was holding them back. Environmental laws and regulations prevent them from ordering the chemicals they require for artillery munition production. Here's a look at some laws and regulations that govern how and when munitions can be used by the US Department of Defense.
I'm sorry, this is the funniest shit of all time. When we're talking about killing each other, blowing shit up, some global warming or some like green laws coming in the way, it's like so weird, right? I mean, we are talking about in the middle of things like, okay, we need to worry about global warming. Yeah, we're talking about blowing shit up, which is the worst thing to global warming that can be. But this is like emergency scenarios. So during times like this for defense, when you're thinking of like trying to increase artillery, some green things coming the way, it's just weird, isn't it? Like, we're not talking about everyday economical things here. We're talking about war times, right? What if we have to defend ourselves? At that time, you're not thinking about all this, right? It's like complete opposite of anything green. You're trying to blow shit up.
There's a lot of restrictions right now. The US ammo production is very high quality, but it takes longer to create. The defense documents I've read about European artillery production state that they recommend manufacturers reduce tolerances. They state that those quality controls only make sense during peacetime, and that they're reaching a point where accepting more risk is reasonable for increased capacity. Things that are risky with artillery is, of course, there's dud rates, or they could explode while in storage. For example, according to Ukrainian and South Korean military intelligence, when Russia procured artillery shells from North Korea, shells provided were of poor quality and had a 50% dud rate, and even destroyed some Russian cannons. If we're to believe that the information coming from the Ukrainian officers, that they claim they've observed artillery shells recently being fired inconsistently in circular patterns without tight groupings. This inconsistent propellant sometimes even caused casualties among the Russian ranks. In addition, the Pentagon reported potential issues with the Russian missiles in 2022, citing estimates of failure rates between 20 and 60% for some types, particularly air-launched cruise missiles. Unreliable 40-year-old munitions with...
Look, man, what does like 20 to 60% even mean? First of all, when you cross 50%, at that time you're just saying, I don't know. It might... Anytime somebody says with any data 50%, they're just saying, I don't know shit. That's what that means. When some weather guy says there's a 50% chance of rain, he's literally saying there might be rain, there might not be rain, I don't fucking know. Right? So when you cross 50%, at that point you're like, okay.
With 50% of them exhibiting rust damage due to improper storage. So there's a sliding scale of either being focused too little on reliability or being focused too much on reliability. So you don't want each shell to be a piece of garbage, but you also don't want each shell to make it treated like some kind of special, unique baby boy. Old infrastructure working at full tilt and understanding their mindset doesn't fully explain how Russia was able to pump out so many shells so fast. You also have to take into account that Russia has also invested in expanding its production capacity through the construction of new facilities and modernizing of existing ones. Thanks to satellite images taken at the end of last year, we know for certain that Russia's efforts are not limited to using existing infrastructure, as we once thought, but that they are also building up. Images taken by Planet Labs, Airbus, and Maxar Technologies show new structures, including hangars and manufacturing plants. Russia's biggest weapons manufacturer responded to this with a statement that should be taken with a grain of salt and a healthy degree of skepticism, saying that the production output of missiles, drones, combat vehicles, and artillery have been ramped up by more than tenfold. But the satellite images do suggest some evidence of movement. To what degree, I don't know. If we believe Russia's state-sponsored media...
I mean, look, this is what I would say, like, at this point, even if you don't believe what Russians are saying, you should still, like, take it seriously, right? So it might not be tenfold now, but I guess that's their target. Maybe they're seeing it going tenfold in a few years or something. Maybe that's their target, which is insane, knowing how it's already, like, that high number, 3 million a year, artillery. Imagine that going a little much higher, like 10... I don't know, like 20 million a year. That would be insane. I feel like that's unrealistic, but who knows?
They've been able to increase tank armored vehicles, civilian and military aircraft by 114%, and artillery munitions by 125%. Whether these numbers are accurate or not, they tell us a story, at the very least, of how Russia is pouring resources into artillery production. But the ability to pump out munitions is only useful if there are hardware artillery pieces to fire them from. One of Russia's limitations is that after about 2,500 rounds, their barrels start to experience wear and tear, micro cracks or barrel warp. The barrels then need to be replaced. There are several ways to do that. You can either slap on a newly produced one or cannibalize from old Soviet stockpiles. And that's exactly what Russian forces are doing. They're taking out thousands of their Cold War era howitzers and putting the barrels on their new pieces. Then, on top of that, we have to consider the pieces lost from attrition. According to open source numbers, Russia has lost approximately 1,100 artillery pieces since the start of the war. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the oldest defense think tank in Britain, has specified that Russia currently holds approximately 4,780 artillery pieces. 20% of those are self-propelled vehicles. Now take a look at Nizhny Tagil. It's the location of another notable company, the Uralwagin-Zavod, which is the largest producer of artillery hardware systems in Russia, with a reported 30,000 employees. This sprawling complex produced 26,000 Russian tanks during World War II, almost half of the total number of T-34 tanks, and now produces a significant portion of Russia's artillery shells. They're increasing shifts, expanding production lines at existing facilities, bringing previously mothballed plants back online, and creating new production plants that have significantly leveled up artillery production. Now, the question of whether or not it will be able to be enough to account for attrition is something that remains to be seen. In addition to ramping up domestic production, Russia has also turned to importing ammo. Last year, Iran reportedly dispatched at least 300,000 artillery shells, although the actual figure may be higher. Still, it's not enough for Russia to keep up with demand, especially when there's a shortage of skilled labor and high-tech manufacturing components. This is not to say that the West doesn't have its own advantages. Expert Dmitry Alipovich of Silverado Policy Accelerator think tank has pointed out that today Russia might not be able to outproduce the West in terms of building submarines or frigates, but is able to outproduce the West in terms of artillery shells. What is useful equipment for the United States is not necessarily what Ukraine needs, as most experts agree that the war will likely be won or lost at this point based on who is able to fire the most artillery shells. And remember, click the link in the description to head over to go.getenergy.
That is just effed up, isn't it? It's like, okay, it's not like the question was, does West have more resources? That wasn't even a question. Like, of course, West has more. USA is powerful. Combined allied countries, let's just call it like, like European Western countries, they are combined is much more powerful. But now we are at the point where Russia can outproduce the entire West on artilleries, and artillery is where the fight is. Now it's not even a question like, like in the end, if the war does like there is no peace talk, where it's going, right? That's just fucked up, right? This is why, you think, like Putin with his KGB background and everything, him being at presidential seat for 3 decades or something, right? I mean, he would know all these things, right? That's why he's being confident all this time, right? We're learning this now, like artillery is important, like West cannot supply Ukraine as near as close to what Russia can produce. And Putin knew that from the day one, right? So yeah, this is what people meant, like, okay, end result is not going to be good for West, Ukraine, or anything, like that, right? And if peace talk doesn't happen. So yeah, this is just insane. Right, well, that was how Russia produces 3 million artillery. But yeah, I don't know, man. Russia's economy is becoming wartime economy. There is no such thing as wartime economy. There is no economy called wartime economy. Only wartime economy means is that you just take shit from other people, right? All those people who's getting more money just making artillery shell than blue collar like lawyers and doctors and things. What is money? Where is money coming from? All that thing is just like meaningless paper. Only way that paper can have value if Russia keep expanding, right? Take countries after countries and steal their resources and shit. Like how back then kingdoms used to do. King and Mongols used to do, basically, right? That's what wartime economy means, stealing shit from other people. The only way wartime economy makes sense if you keep conquering. So is that where Russia is pointing now? If their economy shifts to wartime economy, which means that alone means they won't stop at Ukraine because their economy will literally collapse. That's what that means. That is insane. Alright, well, if you like my content, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.